Okay, so let's dive into this really fascinating book. It's called Inheritance by Harvey Whitehouse, and it tackles some of the biggest questions out there. Who are we and how on earth did we build this wild, complex, modern world on top of a psychology that's, well, ancient?
And it all kicks off with a puzzle that, when you think about it, gets right to the heart of what makes us so unique. And let's be honest, kind of weird. Why do we do things that have no obvious purpose? I mean, think about it. From bizarre fashion trends to super elaborate ceremonies, our lives are just full of seemingly pointless rules.
To figure this out, we first have to grasp a huge idea from the book. This idea that our unnatural, super-modern world is actually built on a very natural, very ancient foundation. Our history isn't just shaped by big wars and inventions. It's shaped by these quiet, stubborn biases, baked right into the human mind.
And this impulse to copy, well, it starts ridiculously young. Get this, in a psychology experiment down in Austin, Texas, kids watched an adult do a whole series of completely useless actions with a box. Tapping it here, waving something over it there, before finally getting a prize out. So what did the kids do? They copied every single pointless step. Psychologists actually have a name for this very human quirk. It's called over-imitation. And what's wild is that chimpanzees, our closest relatives, they just don't do this. A chimp sees a pointless step, and it'll skip right over it to get the reward. But us humans, especially when we're little, we feel this deep, deep need to copy everything, even the silly bits.
And this reveals something huge. We copy for two totally different reasons. On the one hand, you've got prestige bias. That's when we copy an expert, because, we want to learn a useful skill. But the much, much more powerful driver is conformism bias. That's when we copy stuff not to get a result, but simply to belong, to be one of us. This deep-seated need to fit in, well, it brings us to the first major insight from the book. It's a foundational human bias that explains why we are, at our very core, the ritual animal. So, here's the crucial bit. When we see an action that doesn't have a clear purpose, like a weird corporate handshake or a complex wedding ceremony, our brains automatically switch into what the author calls a ritual stance. We just stop looking for a practical cause and effect reason, and we assume the goal is purely social. The point isn't what the action does, the point is that we do it, together.
And this explains so much. It's why our world is just swimming in customs, fashions, and rituals. They aren't about being efficient. They're basically the price of admission to the tribe. They're a way of signaling, hey, I'm one of you. I get the rules. I belong here.
Okay, so we've moved from rituals to our next great puzzle, and the second foundational bias. Why do all human societies, everywhere on the planet, believe in invisible beings? Spirits, ancestors, gods. Is this something we're just taught, or is it something way, way deeper?
The author, Harvey Whitehouse, tells this brilliant story from his fieldwork in Papua New Guinea. He was asking what he thought were these really deep, clever questions about ancestors, like, can they pass through walls? Do they have minds? And his hosts just looked at him, completely baffled. To them, it was like asking if water is wet. Of course they could. And that's because these kinds of beliefs, they're not taught from scratch, like, say, long division. The book makes the case that they emerge naturally. They're an unavoidable side effect of the cognitive tools our brains evolved to use for other, much more practical, survival-y reasons.
Okay, first up, we've got theory of mind. This is our incredible ability to understand that other people have thoughts and feelings and intentions. It's so powerful, in fact, that it's almost impossible for us to imagine our own mind just turning off. And that makes the idea of ghosts and spirits and an afterlife feel incredibly natural to us.
Second, there's a mouthful called promiscuous teleology. Basically, our brain is a toolmaker's brain, so we are hardwired to see purpose and design in everything. How little kids will say that rocks are pointy so that animals won't sit on them. That's it. That's the seed for all the creation myths in the world.
And third, we have HAD, which stands for Hypersensitive Agency Detection Device. Think of it as your brain's evolutionary alarm system. You hear a twig snap in the dark. Is it the wind? Or is it a predator? Well, it's way better to assume it's a predator, or maybe a spirit, and be wrong, than to assume it's the wind and, get eaten. This system makes us constantly feel like someone or something is watching. Now, all this helps explain why some of the most successful supernatural ideas, the ones that really stick around, aren't just intuitive, they're slightly counterintuitive. They're called MCI concepts, and they're like pure catnip for our brains.
Just think about these. A man is normal.
But a man who can fly, that's just one little tweak away from reality. A talking animal, a statue that weeps, these ideas are so sticky because they're mostly familiar, but they have that one little violation of how we think the world works, and that makes them fascinating. It makes us remember them and want to tell other people. This is the very stuff of myth and legend.
So let's pull all these threads together now and look at the big picture of our shared human inheritance. You can think of it as the ancient software that's still running on our modern hardware. So, our minds are built on these ancient biases. First, we have conformism, that deep drive to copy others, to belong, which gives us everything from fashion trends to national holidays. Second, religiosity, our brain's tendency to see purpose everywhere, leading to belief in gods and spirits. And finally, the book explores a third powerhouse, tribalism. That's our deep, deep instinct to form intensely loyal in-groups, which you see playing out everywhere from sports stadiums to political rallies.
The book uses this really powerful metaphor of a garden to explain all of human history. Our natural biases, for rituals, for belief, they're like wild plants that just sprout up everywhere, naturally. Then, over thousands of years, societies learned to cultivate these wild plants, harnessing them to build the first large-scale states and organized religions. In our modern world, it's like a vast, highly structured, maybe even unnatural plantation. But it's all still growing out of that same ancient soil.
So here's the bottom line. We absolutely cannot understand our present, with all of its amazing achievements and all of its terrifying challenges, without first understanding this ancient psychological inheritance. Our supposedly unnatural history is always being shaped and held back by our evolved nature.
And that leaves us with this final, massive question for our time. These deep-seated biases for conformity, for belief, for tribalism, they built our world. The challenge now is, can we finally understand them well enough to consciously grab the reins and harness them for good, to solve the global problems that we're all facing today?